It's Pride Month, and you know what that means. It's time to talk about gay stuff. So for this video, we're going to be talking about what many affectionately call the gayest horror movie ever.
It makes Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, look like a staunch Republican film.
Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. Okay, truth be told, Pride Month actually has little to do with me choosing this movie. I was kind of already planning it after my last video. Then June sort of rolled up and I thought, well, how convenient, which coincidentally is also how I feel about Freddy's Revenge, so might as well take advantage of it. But why Freddy's Revenge? Isn't it just a bad slasher sequel? Well, no, not exactly. It's actually one of the earliest examples of strong queer symbolism in mainstream horror movies. I mean, it was bold in ways horror hadn't been at the time, but to be honest, I've always wanted to talk about this movie. It's so weird and awful and painfully intriguing at times that it's kind of hard not to love it. Sort of like when your kid draws a picture of you. You know, it's crude, looks nothing like you, and is offensive in ways that you can't articulate. But hey, that's your kid, so it's going on the fridge. A Nightmare on Elm Street is arguably one of the most iconic and influential horror franchises in American cinema. Surely, next to Pinhead, Jason, and Michael Myers, Freddy's face is up there on the Mount Rushmore of horror villains. And among a litter of unusual and upsetting nightmare movies is Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. Now, even in a slew of sequels and reboots that can be most kindly described as ambitious, Freddy's Revenge still manages to stand out among the bunch more than Hansen's weird little hand. It's a movie that is so strangely ambitious that its failings end up becoming a part of what makes it so interesting. Freddy's Revenge is both a Nightmare on Elm Street movie and also not one, all at the same time. The accidental genius of this movie's poor structure has created a film that is somehow more interesting to talk about than the one that launched the franchise in the first place. But the question remains, is it even a good Nightmare on Elm Street movie? I believe that everyone has that first nightmare villain deep down in the recess of their childhood trauma. Maybe for you it was Chucky or Pennywise or that creepy black ghost from Courage the Cowardly Dog, but for me it was Freddy Krueger. As a man in his 30s, I still have nightmares about Freddy to this day, and anyone lucky enough to have never experienced this, I can confirm that these are the worst kinds of nightmares. Usually because I can tell I'm dreaming, but I can't wake up. This is essentially the core philosophy behind A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, whether you think the character design or slasher weapon of Freddy is truly terrifying or hilarious,
Beat my high score.
the real fear of his presence is that he attacks you when you're most vulnerable, at a time that is most difficult to avoid, while you're asleep. No matter where you go or when you sleep, he's gonna be there. And he's gonna be waiting for you with his arms wide open. There are so many key ingredients that make up this movie and contribute to its rise in popularity that you could make an entire video of its own just to talk about them. But ultimately, Freddy Krueger was the catalyst for the empire that was being built around him. So you can imagine how strange it must have been for moviegoers at the time to be given the follow-up to one of the most impactful horror movies of the decade and have the main villain almost completely abandon his main appeal for whimsical teenage murder. Freddy's Revenge tries to build a sequel off of one very bold question. What if Freddy didn't need to kill you in your dreams? The film introduces us to Jessie, who is our very own Nancy this time around. And the idea is that Freddy has somehow possessed Jesse and is working towards assimilating his body in the physical realm so that he can run around and murder teens without the constraint of waiting for them to fall asleep, I guess. An interesting concept if it weren't for one little problem. Nobody cares about that. What the audience wants is Robert Englund being kind of goofy and somehow terrifying, murdering teens in creative and interesting dream sequences, which is something that Freddy's Revenge is severely lacking. As a sequel, it probably fails in every way imaginable. I mean, in the first film, dream sequences felt far more ominous before going fully for the scare. There was like a genuine unsettling feeling watching your heroes fight off falling asleep. Then once they were actually in the dream world, you just knew they were totally fucked and that they were probably going to die horrifically at like any moment. Freddy's Revenge unfortunately ditches this dream scene template almost completely, opting for brief glimpses into Freddy's powers as a seductress. The kills too seem to have gotten the short end of the budget. Now, I'm not normally like a spectacle guy when it comes to horror movies, but the bar for technical creativity has always been pretty high on nightmare movies. Franchise always treated death like a creative writing assignment. Every victim gets their own personalized nightmare twisted into something uniquely cruel. Not in this film, though. Gone are the days of rotating rooms and set disasters from flooding the room with 200 gallons of fake blood. In this film, you're lucky to even get a prosthetic chest makeup with a claw slash. Really, the first 45 minutes or so, there's not much to write home about on a Nightmare on Elm Street level. I mean, yeah, there's a few cool things worth talking about, I guess. I like the dream sequence where everything in the room was melting. Obviously, the parakeet scene is golden. And of course, who doesn't love watching Freddy emerge from a young teenage boy like peeling off a wet sock? And while all the cool visual and body horror effects are neat to see on a technical level, they don't really make up for the fact that the main star of the movie rarely ever shows his face. That is until... The pool party scene is basically the only part in this entire film that has any spiritual connection to the rest of the franchise, even if it does break all of the rules. I mean, the pool water starts boiling, wieners exploding in flames on the grill, and some poor kid trying to reason with Freddy like he's a confused, lost psych ward patient.
Just calm down, right? Relax. Yeah. It's gonna be alright.
What the fuck are you talking about, man?
I mean, it's exactly the kind of stupid nonsense I want from a Freddy sequel. The weird part is that even with all the cool payoffs of watching Freddy wreak havoc on a group of kids breaking every horror movie rule imaginable, by the time you get there, it feels completely unearned. I mean, the majority of the film has really been a focus on Jesse and his character, and at no point until now has it felt like Jesse and Freddy have been sharing the screen as co-stars. The strangest part is that the scene isn't bad. In fact, it's probably one of the most entertaining sequences in the entire movie. The problem is that it feels like Freddy has suddenly wandered in from a completely different sequel. For over an hour, we've been watching a story about Jesse, his fears, his repression, and whatever weird arrangement he has going on with Freddy. Then, all at once, the movie remembers it's legally obligated to be a slasher and starts hurling teenagers into patio furniture. The feeling carries over into the finale, where Freddy finally gets the closest thing to a traditional nightmare sequence in the entire film, stalking a teenage girl through a boiler room nightmare. I mean, it's a setup that feels ripped straight out of the first movie, but by this point, Freddy's Revenge has spent so much time building a completely different story that it really barely registers. The film suddenly wants to be a Freddy movie again, only to immediately resolve everything with the power of love and an unsolicited kiss from Lisa. Which, I don't know why, but having a teenage girl kissing Freddy Krueger without his consent feels homophobic for some reason. As a nightmare movie, Freddy's Revenge just doesn't work for me. Not because it's bad, but because it seems completely uninterested in being the sequel audiences were expecting. It abandons the dream logic, sidelines its iconic villain, and spends most of its runtime building towards an entirely different kind of story. At the same time, though, I think that's what's so fascinating about it. At every turn, this movie seems determined to resist becoming a traditional Freddy sequel, which raises a pretty obvious question. Why? I mean, you've essentially been handed the keys to maybe the most important horror sequel of all time, and instead of leaning into it, you've done everything you can to avoid actually making a sequel? So, what did Jack Shoulder and David Chaskin want? Now, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend a documentary called Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street, after watching this video. It does a fantastic job exploring Mark Patton's experience in the film's legacy within queer horror, and while I'm not really drawing my analysis from it, if this movie interests you, it's absolutely worth watching. So, what is it about this movie that's just so, well, gay? I mean, the cheap and easy answer is to just list off all of the homoerotic scenes in the movie, but I'm not going to do that. I have standards. No, I think the real answer is deeper than that. The real answer isn't hiding in the background of the movie. It's standing right in the center of it. Mark Patton plays Jesse, who is our protagonist for this film. He is scrawny, he's effeminate, kind of awkward, and dresses extremely flamboyantly. Basically, he's the opposite of what the world at the time saw as a typical male protagonist. You know, like the muscular, manly men of the 80s, blowing shit up, doing cool little handshakes and whatever. No, Jesse was unique. His character occupied a role typically reserved for women in horror, the Scream Queen. So right off the bat, his character's existence in this movie is already a subversion of typical gender roles in movies of the era. Jesse is struggling with something deep down inside of him that he can't hide, a dark secret that he desperately wants to keep hidden from the world. Something about his identity that if it came out could ruin his life forever. If you're thinking that the secret is he's gay, you'd be wrong.
I wake up on Sunday mornings, I'm like, I don't know how Beyonce does.
The secret is that there's a serial killing burn victim inside of him fighting for control. Freddy uses Jesse's dreams to worm closer into his brain, but they feel less like terrorism and more like persuasion. Temptation, maybe.
And I remember asking Mark if I could make that, if I could make it kind of, and I think the word is homoerotic.
Freddy isn't hunting Jesse. He's recruiting it. It's an important distinction to make because the film repeatedly frames Jesse's internal struggle as something he's trying desperately to suppress. More importantly, something that he believes is evil. The fact that this feeling of queeritude, the fact that this gay feeling is represented through something so sinful should come as no surprise. Take Coach Schneider. Coach Schneider, for all intents and purposes, appears to be another gay man. And in another movie, he'd probably be the mentor figure. You know, the adult who recognizes Jesse is struggling and helps him understand what's happening. Instead, Nightmare 2 turns him into a walking cautionary tale. He's portrayed as predatory and sadistic, and he kind of represents Jesse's worst fears about what becoming that kind of man might look like. And ultimately, he's killed off in the most humiliating and strangely homophobic way possible. I mean, seriously, the gay bashers in It have nothing on this kill. Then you got Lisa and Grady, who almost function as competing futures for Jesse. You see, Lisa is the safe choice, the socially acceptable choice, the person the movie keeps insisting he should be interested in. She's always around, doing him favors, actively supporting him. It's actually uncomfortable at times how lopsided the romantic interest between these two feels. Grady, however, fills a role opposite to hers. He starts the film as something of a bully, but as Jesse's life begins to unravel, he repeatedly finds himself drawn back toward him. Despite being abrasive and kind of a dick, Grady is one of the only people Jesse seems genuinely comfortable around. When Jesse is scared, confused, and convinced something is wrong with him, Grady becomes the person that he seeks out for reassurance. It's what makes their dynamic so fascinating to me. The movie keeps pushing Jesse toward Lisa, but emotionally, he always seems to gravitate back towards Grady. Now, to be fair, Jesse certainly tries. There's even a fairly steamy scene between the two, but the moment things start getting serious, his first instinct is to panic, grow a Freddy tongue, and immediately run across town to spend the night with Grady. And Grady, to his credit, is remarkably direct about the whole situation. At one point, he basically looks Jesse dead in the eyes and says, "Hey, bud, are you gay or something?"
Something is trying to get inside my body. Yeah, and she's female and she's waiting for you in the cabana. And you want to sleep with me.
Seriously, I cannot understate the bizarreness of this dynamic. Movies rarely have female love interests that throw themselves so brazenly at your main character, who at the same time also seems to fear accepting their affection. I mean, even the film's intended subtext makes this whole relationship dynamic feel incredibly gay. But here's the thing, I don't need to argue that this movie is extremely homoerotic. I think most people who are even sort of aware of this narrative agree. The story is symbolic of sexual repression, but there's also more Bale male cheeks in this movie than a Dr. Manhattan scene. And Mark Patton is literally gay. I don't know, it doesn't get much more coincidental than that. No, the question isn't, is the movie gay? The question is, how in God's name did nobody notice? And that... My favorite thing about this movie is not that it's ridiculous or bold or silly or whatever. It's the fact that apparently nobody on set seemed to be aware of what they were making. Nobody except Mark Patton, of course, whose factory set gaydar was apparently going off at every single turn. You're telling me that they can shoot scenes like this and not think anything was a little off? Now, according to both the writer and director, the story was simply meant to explore teenage identity, sexual anxiety, and self-discovery. And while Chaskin did later admit that the inspiration for writing the script was the idea of how scary it must be to question your own sexuality, Schroeder himself always said that he just viewed it as a typical teenage boy going through changes in a journey of self-discovery. Which, to be fair, is a perfectly reasonable explanation right up until the movie starts happening. Everyone that worked on this film said they had no idea.
I simply did not have the self-awareness to realize that any of this might be interpreted as gay.
We made Nightmare 2 absolutely clueless.
I'm absolutely sure there's not one moment that I remember that it was discussed.
I never saw it.
I didn't get it.
When I was shooting, I had no notion that this was happening.
But just for fun, let's tally up every single gay or straight moment of symbolism throughout the movie. Maybe if we put them side by side, it'll be more clear. Who knows? Maybe we're just imagining all the gayness. Straight moments. Jesse makes out with Lisa and briefly ravages her chest like an awkward gay man. Gay moments. Jesse has a game called Probe in his closet. Grady pulls Jesse's pants down. The gay leather bar. Coach is berated with balls. Jesse dances with a phallic object. Coach is slapped bare ass with a wet towel, talking about sphincters in the classroom. Gay one-liners.
Assume the position. He likes pretty boys like you.
Only the wet ones.
Schneider's always got a stick up his ass.
And you want to sleep with me.
Guy gets his rocks off like this.
Jesse asking Grady to watch him sleep.
Just watch.
I've got a crazy favor to ask you.
So much male physique. No girls allowed sign. And so on. Yeah, I just don't see how anyone could be making this movie and not even idly wonder whether or not this could all be taken the wrong way. I mean, at some point, you have to stop looking for subtext and just start looking for a hidden camera. I think this is also a good time to talk about Mark Patton because I think he deserves his flowers. I mean, first of all, he absolutely carries this movie. I mean, he pulls off something horror movies almost never asked male actors to do at the time. And in a strange way, he may have been the only actor to actually pull that off. But beyond performance, the story surrounding this movie had a very real impact on his life. The conversation around Freddy's Revenge followed him for years, and not always in a positive way. I mean, looking back now, it's hard not to feel a little vindicated seeing both the movie and Patton's performance finally get the recognition that they deserve. There's even a little bit in there too about David Chaskin and how when he was confronted about writing sort of a gay script that he actually fell back on claiming it was homophobic, only to later walk that statement back because now it being gay was considered a positive thing. And there is a really great scene of confrontation between him and Mark Patton in the documentary. So yeah, go watch Scream Queen. It's pretty good. So what is it about this movie that makes it so interesting? Well, at its core, it's a movie that is at war with itself, which in another strange convenience is like a perfect metaphor for being closeted. I mean, it's really two different movies smashed together. You got the first hour of a heartfelt coming-of-age story, and then the latter third of a failed Nightmare on Elm Street sequel. And the whole time, both movies are struggling for control of the narrative. I think that's what makes it so iconic. In a weird way, it's inspirational. Like, against all odds, this movie, which by all accounts should have just been, at best, remembered as a bad Freddy flick, has become a Shakespearean tragedy about a repressed gay man forced into heteronormative society. How in the actual fuck did that happen? I mean, yeah, nowadays, it doesn't feel nearly as unusual. There are plenty of openly queer actors, stories, and filmmakers, but imagine being a gay horror fan in the 80s. And somehow discovering that one of the biggest slasher franchises in America accidentally made a movie about you. I mean, geez, that's like a gold medal at the Olympics in my book. Now, does it work as a Freddy flick? No, not really. I mean, actually, among all of the god-awful moments in all of Freddy history, this film probably holds the most top 10 nominees. But 30 years later, nobody remembers Freddy's Revenge because it was a great sequel. They remember it because it accidentally became something else. It's a movie about repression that couldn't stop expressing itself. A movie about identity that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. A movie at war with itself. And somehow, against every possible odd, that's exactly what made it immortal. A big gay pride flag wrapped in a red and green striped sweater, permanently stitched into both horror and queer culture for eternity. Anyway, happy Pride. Freddy Krueger is gay now.